and Lisa Wilner. I think we just added like yesterday. So we've got a lot of new members. So welcome everybody to the committee. Hope that you'll find the committee enjoyable, or our actions beneficial to you and your district and your constituents. And so with that, we would like to start the meeting. I'm going to go ahead and go along the lines of, we only have about an hour, so we're going to do House Bill 47 first. Representative Bentley? We got to do the roll call first, I'm sorry. We're going to call the roll. Go ahead and come to the table. Roll call, please.
Representative Blanton.
Here.
Representative Bowling.
Here.
Representative Bridges.
Here.
Representative Birch. Representative Cantrell. Representative Dossett.
Here.
Representative Dotson.
Present.
Representative Duplessis. Representative Flannery.
Here.
Representative Fugate.
Here.
Representative Johnson.
Here.
Representative Kirk McCormick. Representative Miles. Here. Representative Gibbons Prunty.
Here.
Representative Scott.
Present.
Are you in your annex office?
Yes.
Representative Stevenson. Representative Wesley. Representative Wilner.
Yes, here in my annex office.
Representative White.
Here.
Chair Gooch.
Here. So we do have a quorum. So we will start, as I said, with House Bill 47. Representative Bentley, if you will have your guest introduce yourself and himself, and the floor is yours.
My name is Representative Danny R. Bentley, District 98, which is part of all Greenup County and 4 precincts in Boyd County.
My name is Terry Fife, and I'm a CPA, and I'm also president of Marquet Terminal. It's a landfill, construction landfill in Ashland, Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity and privilege to be here. You know, most times people start out with the boilerplate that's already written on this, but I'm going to talk to you from my heart. All last year, I go to church, and I'd be leaving church, and a gentleman would come up to me and say, Dan says, I'm having a problem. I don't have enough area for my demolition and hard construction. And he says, I got an acre, and sometimes when you're between 2 hills up in Greenup County, they got to go several feet and buy another permit. And he was having problems, and literally that's what he said. So he kept talking. I said, well, I'm voted to represent my constituents, so I presented this bill. Most of you know me well that know this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse because I am a pharmacist. But this was out of that concern for my constituents and grassroots, and so that's the reason I'm presenting it for them. Terry's going to explain first, and then I'll follow up.
Okay. This is how I got involved. I had an 80-year-old client that on Social Security, and she and her husband had passed away, and she had inherited this 1 acre permit.
Yeah.
And I told her that I would try to see
Welcome
about,
to AT&T's teleconference service. Please enter your access code, followed by the pound sign.
so I told her that I would try to see what I could do with it's a 1 acre permit or less than 1, and it's a construction landfill. And in essence, when I went down and met with the environmental people in Moorhead, there's Lyle Walter is with the environmental cabinet. And I wanted to know what the rules were and how it worked and so forth. And what he told me was the original intent of the statute was to divert construction material from the contained landfills that was also potentially causing damage to the liner and so forth because concrete, construction type material. But as far as the environment was concerned, I wanted to make sure there's no environmental issues before I took on this project. And they told me that that's the whole gist of the statute originally, was that those materials did not constitute an environmental issue. So they had no issues with, those type of landfills. Then he asked me, he said, well, your all's not operated in a while. And I said, well, since '09. And he asked me, well, why aren't you all operating? And I said, well, here's your problem. It's for 1 acre. And in order to get a second acre, you got to go a half mile down away from that original permit. And I said, think of the cost and investment in trying to set up to accept that type of waste. And then, when you fill it, you can't do anything with it. You can't put a building on it. You can put a parking lot. But then you're talking about going a half mile down the road in order to get the second permit. And yet you're set up and operating, already where you're at. So I said it's just not economically feasible is the problem. And, originally the original KRS was to try to keep from filling up the other landfills, their spacious, precious space with materials that typically do not cause any kind of runoff or environmental issues. So that's why I'm here today, is trying to explain why there's no operating construction landfills in our entire area. And I think they said they only had one that was operating in their entire region. So the original intent of the KRS isn't taking place because of that rule that you have to go a half mile in order to do the second, permit. So that's what I'm saying is, if this bill allows you to do a contiguous permit, it's still under the same rules and same thing. It just allows a more economic operation to where you can operate.
Okay. So you can see it's more of a keeping jobs and economic thing, and especially when you get to the topography of eastern Kentucky. And we don't have all the flat ground that everybody else is gifted with. But the bill is written that the cabinet may increase the size. It's not shall. I hope y'all see that at the bottom of the page. And then it's everything's in compliance with all the permit requirements and the additional bonding. So we've tried to cover everything, and so we're open for questions now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So in other words, if someone does, they can apply to expand to 2 acres, but if the cabinet doesn't want to do that, this law does not mandate that they have to.
That's correct.
And we do leave if there's extra bonding requirements or whatever, those things have to be met. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think that, I don't know, not if all the committee knows or not, but I think that probably to develop a landfill, Kentucky, it probably cost about $1 million an acre. I've heard that. And, we really do have limited landfill space. And, okay, we have a motion on the bill. Any other questions from the committee members for these gentlemen? Yes, DJ. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a real quick question, for my own information. If this doesn't pass, your solution then is to go open a second site. So this isn't going to stop any expansion of acreage. It's simply going to make it easier for you to do your job. Is that correct? Is that a fair statement?
I think it actually is such that if we have to go a half mile to do another 1 acre landfill, we just shut down and close and make it a parking lot and do something else.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In other words, what you would do then is you would haul that construction debris to another landfill, probably. Is that correct?
It would go to a contained landfill.
Exactly. Okay. Now, we do have a motion and a second on the bill, but Tom Fitzgerald had asked to speak on this, and Tom, can you hear us? You're open to speak on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. For the benefit of the new members of the committee, I'm Tom Fitzgerald. I'm director of the Kentucky Resources Council. This is our 37th year of providing legal and technical assistance to low-income individuals, to communities, to local governments on a range of issues from air, wastewater, mining, utility policy. Solid waste has been a big issue for local governments over the past couple of years, and we're working in Graves and Grant and Scott and other counties to assist local government in dealing with their relationship with landfills, actually. Mr. Chairman, I calculated it. This is my 43rd year of being in front of this committee, and it's every much a privilege now as it was the first time I was there in 1978. I appreciate Representative Bentley and the intent of the bill. I am concerned about expanding the size of unlined construction demolition debris landfills. I was there in 1991. I was the head of the negotiating team that rewrote the solid waste reforms for Kentucky, because we were at that point being dumped on by New York and New Jersey. And we basically had unlined holes in the ground, or possibly 12 inches of clay under our landfills. And we set out to significantly improve the way we manage waste in Kentucky. One of the things that was created was an off-ramp. And the off-ramp was not to encourage the dumping of construction and demolition debris in unlined pits. It was actually intended to allow for demolition and land clearing projects of a limited size. It really wasn't the intent of the parties at the time that these would be commercial ventures that would compete with larger construction demolition landfills that had proper liners and other controls. The waste that we're talking about are waste from construction and waste from demolition, including road demolition. And they are not innocuous waste. As the rainfall percolates through, we call it leachate, it leaches certain chemical constituents. And there is evidence from those sites that do have groundwater monitoring that there are levels of exceedances of lead, boron, arsenic, and manganese above drinking water standards and above standards that are appropriate to the environment. So if you are 1 acre or larger construction demolition landfill in Kentucky, you get a full permit review, you have a liner, you have a leachate collection system to keep the leachate from putting too much hydraulic head on the landfill liner, and you have run-on and run-off controls to protect surface water, and you have groundwater monitoring. So we know if there's a problem, we can go fix the problem before the groundwater pollution becomes the neighbor's problem. If you're 1 acre, if you're less than 1 acre, 0.99% acres, you don't have a liner. You don't have a real advanced permit review. Basically, you file a piece of paper, and 5 days later, you can start your landfill. You have no groundwater monitoring, so we don't know in Kentucky, at least, whether there is a problem with leaching of these constituents. So I'm concerned with sending a message that we are encouraging the expansion of unlined construction demolition debris landfills. The other concern, frankly, is that 100% of the time you don't control effectively what's going into a CD&D landfill. All right, stuff comes in by the truckload, and we had a situation in Scott County where a CD&D landfill is now required to be closed because it had inadvertently accepted cathode ray tubes that turned out to be hazardous. Fortunately, it had a liner, and so whatever the problem is, there is a contained problem because of the existence of a liner, but they're having to close now because of that non-compliance. So in short, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, the less than 1 acre landfills don't have the protections that the cabinet has determined are necessary to prevent groundwater pollution in a state that still has a lot of individuals and a lot of public and semi-public water systems that use groundwater for drinking water sources. And so I would encourage you, I appreciate the intent. I know the intent is that it is well intended, but I think it sends entirely the wrong message that we are going to encourage the proliferation of unlined, unmonitored CD&D landfills. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is again a privilege, and I'm happy to answer any questions that any of the members of the committee might have.
Okay. Tom, it was stated that the cabinet does not have to issue the permit to expand the landfill. So is your reading of the bill that that's correct, that they don't have to do that if they wanted to cite the reasons that you gave as that they should be against it?
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that. The use of shall and the use of may is always an interesting thing. It is couched in terms of they may do this, but they may do this if it is compliant with the permit requirements for the current site, which means it doesn't have a liner, doesn't have groundwater monitoring, doesn't have leachate collection, and it complies with hosting an additional bond. And so my reading of this, after practicing law for 41 years, is if they refuse to grant it, they would be sued for an abuse of discretion, because while it is discretionary, it's discretionary based on two things. One is that you comply with the registered permit by rule, and the second is that you post a bond.
Okay, thank you. We do
Absolutely.
have two questions. Representative Stevenson has a question, and you, Representative, you can ask at whoever, Tom or the sponsor of the bill, but you're recognized to ask a question.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that he answered my question.
Okay, thank you. Representative Blanton, our final question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Tom. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. It's good to see you.
Good to see you, sir, and thank you for your dedication to being our watchdog on these type of issues. I do have a quick question, and I do know that from rain and so forth that there's leaching from materials of any type, for that matter. But I guess my question would be, if currently they can go a half mile down the road from a current location and put in another 1 acre, you've got 2 acres. So I don't see the issue that you put them at the same location as you're moving them a half mile down the road. You still got 2 acres of landfill. And regardless, in the end, you've got 2 acres. So I guess why is there a big issue with allowing them to put the 2 acres collectively? And in Eastern Kentucky, as you're well aware of, you may have to go a few miles to find another acre that you can actually put stuff in. So I guess I'm a little bit confused as to why it's an issue to put 2 acres at one location rather than spread them out between a half a mile.
It's a very good question. You know, the problem with these types of landfills as a category is that we have learned over the years that these wastes are not inert, and they are, as you mentioned, there's leachate that occurs. You know, if I were the person writing the policy, I wouldn't allow 2 of them. I would say, you know, the intent was an off-ramp for construction and demolition debris. It was not intended to be a commercial enterprise that was going to be in competition with folks who put in liners, put in leachate collection, and all that. So your point's well taken. I just think it sends the wrong message that we're going to encourage you to double the size of unlined landfills, whether they be next door to each other or they be half a mile away. That's the cabinet's policy, to allow more than one with a certain distance. I'm not sure what the basis for that is, but it certainly wasn't as I recall, and I'm getting up in years now, but as I recall the intent, it was in 91, it was not to encourage the proliferation of landfills that don't have a liner, don't have leachate collection. Because as you know, Representative Blanton, you've got old CCA wood that was treated with chromium, copper, and arsenate. You've got lead paint on some of the demolition debris. You've got coal combustion residuals, which have a lot of metals that are in the concrete. And these things do leach. And when they leach, they can contaminate drinking water supplies. So your point's well taken. And I don't know that the intent really wasn't to pockmark the landscape with less than 1 acre unlined landfills. And I just think, encouraging the doubling of the size of these is the wrong policy. But I appreciate very much your question.
Follow-up question, Tom.
Sure.
So if you go a half a mile and you put in another acre, you are potentially going to be impacting a second watershed. Whereas if you had the 2 acres at one, your chances are better that you're not spreading it to as many watersheds. So it would be better to have those 2 acres at the same location rather than spread half a mile apart.
It could be depending on the circumstances. You could have one watershed that has a lot of fire clay, so you're not going to get a lot of offsite contamination. You could have another watershed that has a fracture flow, and it's going to really quickly stair step into into the surface water. It's very site specific, and that's one of the concerns with these landfills is they don't have advanced review. You file a piece of paper, 5 days later, you are up in business potentially, and nobody's looking at your siting. Nobody's looking at whether this is a good idea, and then you have no groundwater monitoring, so you don't know if it turns out to be a bad idea. But your point's well taken, and that's the sort of site-specific review that every other type of landfill gets, but these don't.
Thank you, Tom. Thank
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
One question, Tom.
Sure.
Let's say that you have an abandoned homestead, an old house, an old barn, a building that's just maybe abandoned. It's sitting there. It's deteriorating. We know that, okay, if you do tear that down, you put it in a construction landfill, there may be some leaching and as things break down. But what about that facility that's really subject to the weather conditions as it stands? Do you actually have the same type of leaching and release of with that as you might if something were in a landfill buried?
You absolutely. In fact, the putting things into the landfill may delay the biological and chemical breakdown of the waste, depending on, because you go from aerobic to anaerobic conditions after a period of time. But yes, you have, for example, we had a situation where a public housing project was certified to be lead-free inside, but there was lead paint around the eaves of the structure and ended up tracking lead into the house because of it, because the lead had leached from the building over the course of time. So yes, you have those concerns with that material, which is why the off-ramp was initially created, Mr. Chairman, was because you had folks in the construction industry who say, when we demo, we typically demo into the basement and we cover it up rather than hauling the material off. So this was intended to provide, or if somebody's clearing a site for a project, they have a lot of trees and they have a lot of stumps and things. This was intended for a limited application as an off-ramp, not really intended to be a commercial business.
Okay, thank you. As I said, Representative Blanton had the last question. Tom, just want to thank you for taking the time to be here. We were joking earlier about the mute comment. I think you know that. You and I have been friends a long time, and it's always a pleasure to work with you. And,
Chairman, thank you. I appreciate very much your accommodating me. And for the new members of the committee, you got one of the best committees here in the General Assembly. There's never a dull moment.
That's for sure. Thank you. I'd ask for the Secretary to call the roll, please.
Representative Blanton,
Yes.
Representative Bowling,
Yes.
Representative Bridges,
Yes.
Representative Birch, Representative Cantrell, Representative Dossett, Representative Dotson,
Yes.
Representative Duplessis, Representative Flannery,
Yes.
Representative Fugate,
Yes.
Representative Johnson,
Yes.
Representative Kirk McCormick,
Yes.
Representative Miles,
Yes.
Representative Gibbons Prunty,
Yes.
Representative Scott.
No.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Stevenson,
No. No.
Representative Wesley,
Yes.
Representative White? Yes. Representative Wilner?
If I could comment briefly, Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this is my first, I was just appointed to this committee yesterday afternoon. And I have a lot of respect for Dr. Bentley. And like him, this is a little bit outside my wheelhouse as a psychologist. I've known, Tom Fitzgerald and the Kentucky Resources Council for decades, and the good work that they do. And I'm very compelled by Fitz's testimony, and I am a no vote today. And I also want to thank the many, many people. I mean, it was astonishing. I was appointed to the committee at something like 4:30 yesterday, and I had so many emails from people who have expertise in this topic asking for my no vote. So I'm going to defer to that expertise and vote no today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Gooch?
Yes. Go ahead. The bill does pass with favorable expression that same should pass. So thank you very much. Congratulations, Representative Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we're going to hear House Bill 207. We have some people coming to the table for that. As chairman, I'm going to use the chairman's prerogative to make some comments from the chair. And this is, as you know, it's my bill. It's one that we did last year. It passed out of the committee last year, a little bit different. One of the things that, and one of my reasons for bringing the bill is that, for many, many years, Kentucky was pretty much, we were almost entirely a coal state. When I came to the legislature in 1995, we probably 93 to 95% of our electricity was generated from coal. And that's changed a lot since then. And as we gave up those coal jobs, we realized that maybe we probably should diversify, and we also came to realize that as a nation, it's going to take all sources of energy for us to meet our needs, and so we realized that we probably need to be in all of the above, which meant we shouldn't prohibit anything from being used in Kentucky as long as it was clean and reliable and affordable. And so that's kind of what we've been trying to do. Well, there are sources out there who have started to, forces out there who've started to try to say, okay, well, we don't want certain types of energy. And often it's an emotional argument. It's not really valid science or valid facts or whatever around that. And we realize that for us to maintain the most reliable, the most affordable electricity, those kind of policies need to be set at a state level. And it's something that shouldn't happen, piecemeal, and that sort of thing, because what can happen is it can actually drive up costs for people in other places. Let me give you one example, and it's totally unrelated to this, but I hope you'll indulge me. I think all of you know that years ago the federal Congress decided that it would be much better, and I think rightly so, that automobiles, if they got more gas mileage, better gas mileage, there would be less emissions into the environment. And certainly we can all agree that that's true. And so they set some what we call CAFE standards, where vehicles have to meet certain mileage standards. And what they did was that there's some vehicles that meet them and some vehicles that aren't even close. And so what they did is they kind of worked it out to where they manufacture enough cars where the average of all the vehicles would meet the standards. Well, what happened then was California as a state decided that they were going to have more strict standards than the federal government, which we would all think, well, that's okay. But what we didn't realize is that their market was so large, and you had 4 or 5 states then that would, whatever California did, they would do. And so what happens, the auto manufacturers then started actually not using the federal standards, they started using the California standards as far as emissions. So what happened was, in order to meet those standards, auto manufacturers were having to produce cars that the consumers didn't really want to buy. people really, they want a pickup truck, they want an SUV or whatever. And so, but the company still had to make those autos. And so what happened then was, they couldn't just make those autos and let them sit there and lose money on them. They had to sell them. And so they had to either lower the price of those, they had to offer special discounts or incentives or whatever for people to buy the cars. And this may be a little bit of oversimplification, but it's really what happened. And what you may not realize is that your constituents pay more for the automobiles that they want because California sets the standards. And so that's what we want to avoid with energy, where certain smaller groups can set standards and possibly, in fact, raise everybody's rates. And so, that's just, and I didn't know until a couple of years ago that we were actually paying more for our automobiles that we buy because of California standards, because they set a stricter standard and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what this bill attempts to do on the utility level. We believe that we're an all of the above energy state. We believe that we're a state where the state policies need to be set in a way that guarantees reliable and affordable electricity to especially our most vulnerable citizens. So with that, we have a couple of people here to testify. I'm going to allow them to testify on my bill. We have Bryden Ross. And if you'll introduce yourself and your group, and then your guest can introduce himself, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Bryden Ross. I'm the Vice President of State Affairs. Sorry about that. Sorry, apologies there. Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Bryden Ross. I'm the Vice President of State Affairs for Consumer Energy Alliance. We've got over 5,500 grassroots members here in Kentucky, but we're a nationwide organization that advocates for affordable, reliable energy. We're an all of the above association. We have members who support all facets of energy development, from solar to offshore wind, nuclear, coal, gas, upstream, downstream, midstream, you name it, we've got them. Farm bureaus, chambers of commerce, home builders, folks who care about the price of energy, the affordability, and folks along the energy consumption chain. Nucor Steel is one of our board members, got a large facility here in the state. So a lot of our members really care about the bottom line at the end of the day. And we really want to commend the chairman for offering this bill, because it's a simple one, but it's critically important, because what we're seeing across the country are literally dozens of cities who are trying to dictate the energy choices of families and the services that they want to have in their own home and their own business, even if that source of energy is perfectly allowed by the Federal Power Act, by state law, and others. And I want to reiterate, we want to see a cleaner, greener future. We have members who are in the renewable energy space as well. But we think these policies are really short-sighted and misguided. One, because they're targeted a lot around things like natural gas, which are really helping drive the emissions reductions we're seeing in this country. We're actually on pace to meet our Paris Climate Agreement emission reductions, even though we didn't sign that treaty, largely due to natural gas. But what we're seeing around the country, though, are folks who don't care for that. And the problem is what that does to regular people. So an electrification mandate, or forcing you to switch out of gas appliances in your home that you may want, is incredibly expensive. And what people don't think about is a sticker shock that could have for families down the line, or businesses as well. So depending on the type of dependency you have on gas service in your home, for a family in Kentucky, that could be an over $10,000 sticker shock if one of these mandates came to you. Again, that depends on the type of wiring you have, the appliances you have, and the like. But that's a real cost. And I think a lot of times people gloss over those facts and what would do to regular people. I don't have to explain this committee, we're a challenged state when it comes to poverty issues and the like. Almost 1 out of 5 Kentuckians live at or below the poverty level. So a sticker shock like this would be really ruinous for them. I think also, too, thinking that regular homeowners and businesses around the state, depend on natural gas and propane and the like. Over 40% of our state relies on propane and natural gas to heat their homes. These energy bans would definitely impact folks there, from a manufacturing base as well. Almost 40% of the state's energy consumption on the natural gas side is from our manufacturing base, over 250,000 jobs. So I think that's why you've seen such a diverse coalition of people who've supported this bill, from home builders, general contractors, realtors. It's not just folks in industry. It's from the utility side down to the consumer side and the chamber and others. So we think this is a common sense bill. It's unfortunate sometimes we have to come here, and we want to thank the chairman that he's doing this and looking after consumers in this state. We're seeing this, in other states as well. Our neighboring states are trying to put protections in their law. This doesn't create any sort of new, I think, unforeseen consequences. I know folks may be concerned about. This only protects what's allowed by the PSC, what's regulated by the PSC. That service is guaranteed and allowed in a consumer's home. And we think that's a simple, straightforward way to where folks can still get the cleaner, greener future you want. We want to see that future as well, but we want to protect energy consumers along the way. So with that, I'll turn it over to David and let you go as well. Yeah, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand what you're talking about in homes if they're mandated to use certain energies or having to change things out and so forth. But we've had an issue over the past year or so going on in the central part of the state about I would say a very large solar farm going in, and would this take away the control of the local government to not allow something like that to go in their area? Does this take away their control to say, no, we're not going to allow you to put that in?
Yeah, if you'll allow me to answer that, Representative Blanton. My name is David Samford with the law firm of Goss Samford, PLLC in Lexington. Previously, I spent about 5 years as general counsel for the Kentucky Public Service Commission, the deputy director, and then over the last decade, I've been in private practice, primarily representing utilities, energy developers, things of that nature. So the answer to your question is no. This bill is very, very narrowly tailored to prohibit local governments from creating any sort of ban on the types of lawful utility services that are provided and regulated by the state. There are several things that it does not do, which are equally important. And the first one, like you mentioned, is it doesn't in any way impact the jurisdiction of the Kentucky State Siting Board on electric generation transmission. So any non-regulated merchant generation facility like a solar facility, a windmill, anything like that, is still going to be fully subject to the jurisdiction of the Siting Board. And the nice thing about the Siting Board statute is when it was enacted by the General Assembly, it has flexibility so that there's significant local input into the Siting Board's decisions. 2 of the members, 7 members of the Siting Board are actually from the county or the city where the proposed project is located. And then when you're talking about siting requirements or any sort of planning and zoning requirements that a local government may have for merchant generation, the Siting Board by statute has to take those into account. So this will have absolutely zero impact, no negative impact whatsoever to local government's role in what they already do with regard to siting merchant electric generation. If I could, just a little bit more to that point, it also doesn't change anything about the Public Service Commission's jurisdiction. They still have the exact same jurisdiction today that they'll have after this bill is passed. So all of the things that regulated utilities would like to do still have to have the same level of scrutiny that they would currently already be required to have. There's also been some concern, I think, maybe about whether or not this bill impacts local government's franchising authority. And again, the answer to that's a resounding no. Franchise authority arises under Section 163 and 164 of the Kentucky Constitution. And by definition, the statute cannot take away what a local government enjoys as a constitutional privilege or a constitutional prerogative. So there is zero detrimental impact to local franchise authority as a result of this. I would also just point out, kind of from a technical point of view, there's a well-known statutory construction canon, which is how we interpret statutes, that says you can't repeal a statute by implication. If the General Assembly wants to change an existing law, it has to amend or repeal that law. And so when you're talking about all of these areas of PSC regulation, that's under KRS Chapter 278. If you're talking about siting board statutes, again, that's under KRS Chapter 278. If you're talking about local government's municipal or county franchising authority, that's under KRS Chapter 96. And if you're talking about local planning and zoning, that's under KRS Chapter 100. As you'll notice, this bill is in KRS Chapter 65, which means that none of those other bodies of law are even remotely implicated. And that's a very critical, important point to demonstrate how narrowly tailored this piece of legislation is.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any question? Yes, Mr. Dodson.
I have a couple of questions. I'm from Clark County, and we had a huge issue this past summer with solar farms. With that being said, I went to a lot of the meetings. The people were very upset over property being purchased without even getting regulation authority. And talking about those things, I stood with them because there was some things that we come to find out at a later date that these people had came in and purchased property and already had started making deals without going through even the fiscal court, talking to planning and zoning, just assuming just because they've been in other communities that they would just be able to come into our community. Well, with that being said, again, I support the spirit of this bill. I understand that we do need renewable energies, but at the same time, it is my feeling that these decisions need to go to local authorities because some communities are more conducive and more accepting of certain things than other communities are. So my question to you guys, and maybe to even some of you here today on the panel, is that with this blanket state regulation, would it prohibit people from coming to the forefront in each community and saying, we don't want this in our backyard? We don't want this. It's unsightly. Come to find out, some of the information we got about solar farms, they're sometimes not as clean as they pretend to be. So, there's a lot of runoff. Once agricultural land has been used, there is gravel placed down. There should be some reclamation things in place. So I just want a little more information. I want to be able to talk to my constituents. I want to be able to intelligently to defend it. At this point, I don't have that. So.
Sure. I mean, we'd be happy to provide any additional information or meet with you. But again, there's nothing in this bill that detracts that doesn't take the first comma away from local government's existing authority with regard to those types of facilities.
So a fiscal court could actually shoot it down if it went to the fiscal court, even if it's a state law.
I don't know that the fiscal court has the authority to shoot down something right now, so I hesitate to say yes. But the county judge executive is generally a member of the siting board process, so one of 7 votes on there. If there's local planning and zoning commission rules for non-merchant generation, which again isn't even what we're talking about in this bill, but if they have local planning and zoning commissions, that has to be abided by.
Now, from my understanding, one more thing, is that once it goes to planning and zoning and it passes there, then it has to go to the fiscal court. That's what we were looking at back during the summer. So it would have to go through that process. So you're saying that's not necessarily the case.
I think that's more a function of how the local government has empowered its planning and zoning.
So it's not necessarily statewide?
Correct.
Just local, okay.
And to the point, sir, I think what I want to reiterate this bill does is actually provide consumer protections for folks from the energy service they're allowed to have today. That's why we're supporting this bill. It simply just says if the energy service you're getting today, if you like that service, you get to keep that service, and a local municipal ban can't take it away from you.
Right.
That's what this bill does, and that's why we support it.
Yeah, we're not trying to force anyone to
Any
use
decisions
some
on
other
anybody.
new source of energy. Right. It's just if service is available to you now, you can continue to use it, and a local jurisdiction can't say you can't buy natural gas or you can't have natural gas hot water or those sorts of things. So that's the purpose of the bill. Any other questions? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have a question.
Okay.
Not sure how we do that remotely.
How do we do that remotely? Well, I mean, you can go ahead and ask the question. I mean, just ask.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. So House Bill 207, prohibits local governments from taking any legislative action that limits control of private utilities. Are there localities in Kentucky who have taken that action to try to restrict or limit utility operations that benefit their communities?
The answer to that is yes. Let me find it real quick.
Mm-hmm.
In 2018, I think there was a resolution that was.
Excuse me, Representative Scott, can you hear him?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I apologize for being a little soft-spoken, Mr. Chairman. In 2018, there was a resolution. I don't know that it passed, but it was certainly, I believe, introduced that, quote, the Metro Council opposes all new fossil fuel infrastructures, including those primary purposes transporting or storing fossil fuels in or throughout Louisville Metro or adjacent waterways. So, I mean, that resolution would not just implicate, the types of consumer protections we're talking about here, but also theoretically barge traffic on the Ohio River. So,
Okay.
sweeping.
Is that the only one? Because I'm from Louisville and it didn't pass in 2018.
I've been told, but I don't know that this is absolutely true, that Lexington did something similar about 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
But again, the goal with this legislation is to head it off before it becomes a problem. We're trying to put the horse back in the barn, so to speak.
Do you have examples of some things that are happening in other states?
Go ahead.
Absolutely. There's been over 60 municipal bans on natural gas service and fossil fuel service across the country. New York City just had a no hookups ban by 2030 passed last week. I believe the city of Louisville passed a 100% renewable policy last year. So if you're going to meet these mandates to get to 100% renewables, and if your goal is to actually hit that, you're going to have to start denying service to folks. So that's what I think the concern is that, we see natural gas as a complement to bringing on renewables and other things that people want to see. We want to see that as well. We just don't want to take away people's energy choices along the way to do that. And I think you can get to those the two are not mutually exclusive. And so that's, I think, the blunt instrument of a fossil fuel ban is not helpful in the near term to actually doing the transition I think people want to see. And so that's our concern as well, too.
Okay,
One
thank
more
you.
question.
Okay,
Sorry. One of the issues that we came across, and you guys can maybe clear this up, is that a lot of the energy that would projected to be produced in Clark County was actually going to be transmission to North Carolina and some northeastern states. And a lot of that energy was not even going to be used in Kentucky or locally. So how much of that energy that we capture actually stays in Kentucky?
That's a good question, and I'll answer it this way. As the father of two teenage kids, electrons are sort of like teenagers with car keys and gasoline. They go where they want to go. So when electricity gets generated and put onto the grid, the physics of the grid determine where it goes. So that's kind of the physical operation. The financial piece is that most utilities in the United States and most of them in Kentucky, when they generate electricity, they actually sell it into the wholesale bulk power market, and then they purchase it back out to be able to supply their actual customer load. That's Kentucky Utilities and LG&E are a little bit different, but I think all of the other major major electric utilities in the state operate under that business model. So that would not be any different than any other utility in the state.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Stevenson?
I just want to be sure I understand. We don't have any examples yet. We don't have a problem yet. And we're not counting on local officials to take care of their unique situations as they come up.
Well, there is a demonstrated problem nationally. In Washington, I think Governor Inslee has legislation pending that would phase out natural gas from buildings by 2050. In Massachusetts, a dozen towns have started that same sort of thing. The city of San Jose in California has a natural gas ban. I believe the same thing's true in Oakland. So, it's definitely something that's happening in California, Washington, New York, some of those other states. And so the goal is to be out in front of that and to not have a problem and to be proactive.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have a final question from Representative Dossett.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On these other areas that are putting these regulations into place, do we have any idea of what that additional cost is that it would create to the customer, the citizen at home themselves that's already struggling to meet their bills? What would we be looking at if there was mandated, if we took away these type of forms of energy?
Yeah, we've actually done quite a bit on that. I would say if you just look at when the Green New Deal came out, we did analysis just on replacing natural gas appliances nationwide. It's over $250 billion for the consumer. That's just on the appliance. That's not on the labor. That's not on the wiring. That's not on the parts. New Jersey, they've had what's called an energy master plan process we've been involved in. For some folks there, you're looking at almost a $30,000 hit, depending on kind of the density of your home, how reliant you are on gas. I put some facts in with some testimony I shared for an average consumer is probably looking at around $10,000, depending, again, with the model you buy, how dependent you are on gas in your home, and the like. So, on national average, to buy a heat pump is over $5,000 for sure. So if you're getting rid of your furnace, that's a $5,000 hit you're forcing on folks just for the furnace. So that's not including anything else.
Okay. Can we have a motion on the bill? Do we have a second? Okay. Now, I do have two people that have asked to speak, and so I'm going to let Bryden and David maybe stay close. And J.D. Cheney is here. I think he wants to, from the League of Cities, wants to talk about the bill. And we don't have a lot of time, so I know J.D. would be short anyway, so.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. I really do appreciate you providing the opportunity. Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All these microphones are a little different than they were. It's an unenviable position to come to a committee and oppose the chairman.
Is the green light on?
Now it is.
Okay, great.
All right. It's an unenviable position to come to the committee and testify against the chairman's bill, especially yours, Chairman Gooch, former mayor of Providence, who is, I would say, one of the most consistent members of the General Assembly with regard to protecting home rule. And unfortunately, when you represent cities, sometimes you end up having policy differences. This is one of those instances. As we've met many of you new legislators and others, the league may be a whole lot of things, but one thing we've achieved to be is consistent. And this bill definitely goes right at the heart of home rule and the ability for local decision making to be made at the local level. For that reason, our board has voted to oppose it. Now, we would encourage you. I'm here to encourage you to either vote no on this bill, or to pass and allow the opportunity to work for some additional clarifications in this legislation so we can be absolutely certain. I wish I had the certainty by the previous speakers that the breadth of the language, the way this is drafted, would not impact other types of local decisions that could be made related to franchising authority. Unfortunately, we've had experience with the General Assembly passing legislation and spent years not being able to collect franchise fees until we went to the Supreme Court with regard to that legislation to have that clarified. So what we're asking for is, because this strikes at home rule, allow your community. These local elected officials are there to represent you. This is not California. Kentucky is not California. Kentucky is not Massachusetts or New York. I think you've heard me say it. I think it may be irritating to some extent, but this is a bill with a solution in search of a problem here, by and large. So I think we need to take the league and our elected officials across the state are asking you to take some time, clarify this language. Perhaps if we're talking about energy source, and I know you said be brief, and I won't take too long, but if we're talking about energy source, and that's what you want to get at. We have 416 cities in Kentucky, 120 counties. For investor-owned utilities, it would probably be impossible for them to weave together when you're serving Covington and then you go down to Fort Mitchell with a different mix on the energy portfolio in order for them to be able to operate. Be precise in the language, clarify what it doesn't do, and then perhaps it would be something that would be more acceptable to the elected officials. But right now, the way this is drafted, it's extremely overbroad, and we ask the committee to take a pass on it until it could be clarified. Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate you again.
Any questions? And also, I think by virtually we have Annette DuPont Ewan that wants to speak from representing the I think municipal utilities. So you are recognized, Annette. Can you hear us? Right. Okay.
You're on mute.
Yes.
Okay,
Annette, can you unmute?
Thank you so much.
Okay, there you are. We can hear you.
Okay. Good morning. My name's Annette DuPont Ewing. I'm Executive Director of the Kentucky Municipal Utilities Association. Thank you, Chairman Gooch and committee members, for allowing me to speak today. Let me tell you a little bit about the association very quickly. We represent 42 city-owned utilities that provide the essential services of electricity, natural gas, water, wastewater, and telecommunications. And KMUA's members are proud to provide low-cost, efficient, reliable service to 750,000 Kentuckians in cities across the Commonwealth. We represent locally owned and operated utilities that are governed by city officials or independent boards that are appointed by city officials. Our member managers live and work in their communities, providing service and employment to the citizens of Kentucky. And we understand Chairman Gooch's concern. He filed this bill to prevent states like California from passing laws that only allow carbon-free or carbon-neutral fuels to be used. Honestly, I wonder if we really need that solution in Kentucky, when the state is 15th in the nation for energy production and 71% of our fuel still comes from coal. You heard from the previous speakers that this is a resolution, that resolutions and policies have been passed, and I remind you that resolutions and policies are not law. Without, especially in Kentucky, without knowing more about the need for the legislation and its beneficiaries, it's difficult for KMUA to support it. Remember, the language is only 3 sentences long with little detail. So there's a lot of ways to interpret it. And that does mean uncertainty and potentially unintended consequences. House Bill 207 would amend KRS Chapter 65, and this new language is protective of PSC regulated electric, gas, and pipeline facilities and rural electric and telephone co-ops, but prejudicial to local government, including municipal utilities. Here's the most important part. KMUA interprets this bill as preventing a city from offering a service if it is already provided by an investor-owned utility. And this creates an unlevel playing field for city utilities because it protects investor-owned utilities at the expense of nonprofit city utilities. So in conclusion, KMUA is genuinely concerned about the bill and opposes the language. Thank you again for the opportunity, and that concludes my testimony.
Annette, let me ask you a question. Of course, you know my background. I was mayor of the city of Providence, a city that, we're not an electric generator, but we purchased our electricity wholesale and sold it retail to our consumers. I certainly would never be for anything that would limit a city like Providence from being able to buy electricity and then reselling it. That's what we do. And we do the same thing with natural gas. I can assure you that I would not be for anything that would in some way put investor-owned utilities, give them unfair advantage against our local cities. I mean, it's just not who I am. It's not what I would do. So I'm just a little curious as to how you think that this bill would do that.
Well, Representative Duke, I know you, and I know you've been a champion for cities for a very long time, especially municipal utilities, since you have one in your district, and I appreciate that very much. But because the way the language is written, and because it's so short with very little detail, we had our legal counsel look at it, and it does create this position where city utilities cannot offer or have the ability to offer utility services if they're already provided by an investor-owned utility. And that creates that unlevel playing field. Unintended, although it may be. And I don't like testifying against you, Chairman, because I know this is your bill, and I know you have the city's best interest at heart. So I would like to request, like J.D. Cheney did, that we take another look at the language and we try and come to some kind of an agreement so that we can take a pass today but bring it up later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David, could you or Braden come to the table and, that last point, I don't think that our bill does that we are in any way limiting a municipal utility from providing a service that some other, can you respond to that in any
Yes,
way?
you're correct, Mr. Chairman, and I would draw everyone's attention to the last, I guess it's the last 3 lines, where we're talking about really that's part of the narrowly tailored aspect of this. It's the utility services described in 278.010, which again are public utilities regulated by the Public Service Commission that are provided by a utility that is regulated by the Public Service Commission, so that municipal utilities are not under KRS Chapter 278 or is otherwise incorporated under KRS Chapter 279. And so that brings in the electric cooperatives who are not regulated by the Public Service Commission because they purchase their power from the TVA. So this bill doesn't have any limitations on municipal utilities. I mean, theoretically, if a municipal utility wanted to enact some sort of a ban, I guess it could do that. It has zero application to them.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions, ask the secretary to call the roll, please.
Representative Blanton,
Yes.
Representative Bowling,
Yes.
Representative Bridges,
Yes.
Representative Birch, Representative Cantrell, Representative Dossett, Representative Dotson,
No.
Representative Duplessis, Representative Flannery,
Strong yes.
Representative Fugate,
Explain my vote, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, right now I'd like to pass, and just because late last night I got a call from a couple of my city mayors, and I'd like to talk to them about what their concerns are, and then maybe see some clarifying language that would ease the minds of the city officials. And but I look forward to supporting it on the floor if we can get those worked out. Thank you.
Representative Johnson,
Explain my yes vote.
Yes, go ahead.
First off, Mr. Chairman, thank you for bringing this proactive bill. Typically, we wait until there's a problem and there's been some harm caused, and then we try to fix it. This bill does the opposite. It actually anticipates the situation and deals with it, so thank you for that. And also, I'd say I'm a pretty strong advocate for home rule, but the one thing that will trump home rule in my mind is individual rights, and you guys have used the term consumer protection. I use the term individual rights, private citizens' rights, and I think this goes a long way to protecting those. So I want to thank you, and I'm a yes vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Kirk McCormick,
Yes.
Representative Miles,
Yes.
Representative Gibbons Prunty,
Yes.
Representative Scott,
No.
Representative Stevenson,
No.
Representative Wesley,
I'd like to explain my vote.
Yes, go ahead.
At this moment, I feel like Representative Fugate. Where I'm from, we have a lot of natural gas and coal mines, and I would like to talk to them a little bit more. So I would like to pass at this moment. Thank you.
Representative White, Representative Wilner,
No.
Chair Gooch.
Yes. Okay. Bill does pass with favorable expression that same should pass. Thank you, committee members. Do we have a motion to adjourn?